The message arrived at 3 in the morning Earth time, and it carried the golden seal of the Galactic Council Ambassador Kai Okonkwo. Read it twice in the dim light of his apartment in Lagos. His coffee growing cold on the table beside him, he was being summoned to speak before the full assembly of the Galactic Council. All 347 member species. Gathered in one place for the first time in 60 years, humanity had been a probationary member of the galactic community for only 11 years. Granted a single seat with no voting power, barely acknowledged in the grand halls of Nexus Prime, they had never been permitted to address the full council before. Now they were being commanded to appear. Kai knew why. Of course, everyone knew why 3 months ago. A human carrier group had encountered a Vrethkai raiding fleet in the Proxima system. The Vrethkai had been terrorizing that region of space for over 800 years, attacking colony ships, enslaving populations, and burning worlds that refused to pay tribute. The Council had always called it a regional dispute and refused to intervene, but the Vrethkai made a mistake that day in Proxima. They attacked while human warships were present. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the entire Vrethkai fleet had been reduced to floating wreckage, and 30,000 civilians from 3 different species had reached safety on the colony world below. The galaxy had watched the battle footage in stunned silence. Now the ancient powers wanted answers. Kai set down the message and walked to his window, looking out at the lights of Lagos stretching toward the horizon. He was 63 years old, and his body carried the marks of a lifetime spent in service. Burn scars covered the left side of his face, a gift from the Battle of Titan when he was 34. His left knee ached when it rained, rebuilt twice with synthetic cartilage. His hands, once steady enough to perform field surgery under fire, now trembled slightly when he was tired. He had retired from the Marine Corps 5 years ago with the rank of general, expecting to spend his remaining years teaching at the academy and writing his memoirs. Instead, here he was, being pulled back into a battle he never expected to fight. His communicator buzzed with an incoming call from Geneva, from the offices of Earth's diplomatic corps. He answered it and found himself looking at the exhausted face of Director Chun, head of the Interstellar Relations Division. "You received the summons," she said without greeting. "I did. The Council wants to censure humanity for the Proxima incident," Director Chun explained, her voice tight with frustration. "They are calling it excessive militarization and violation of the Accords of Gentle Resolution." Kai almost laughed at that. The Accords of Gentle Resolution were a set of guidelines created by the ancient powers thousands of years ago, designed to ensure that conflicts were resolved through endless negotiation and carefully managed compromise. In practice, they meant that aggressors could do whatever they wanted as long as they agreed to attend meetings about it afterward. "Who are they sending to represent us?" Kai asked. Director Chun hesitated. "That is why I'm calling," she admitted. "Our professional ambassadors have all declined the assignment." "Declined?" "They believe it is a trap," she said. "The Council does not want a defense general. They want a public humiliation. They want to put humanity in its place in front of the entire galaxy." Kai understood immediately. If Earth sent a polished diplomat who tried to play by Council rules, they would be torn apart by beings who had been practicing political manipulation for millennia. The ancient empires would use every trick, every procedural trap, every rhetorical weapon in their vast arsenals. Earth's representative would leave the rotunda looking like a fool, and humanity would be diminished in the eyes of every watching species. "So you want someone expendable," Kai said flatly. "We want someone who cannot be intimidated," Director Chung corrected. "Someone who has faced worse than disapproving aliens and survived. Someone who does not care about diplomatic careers or political consequences." She paused. "We want you." General Okanko Kai was silent for a long moment. He thought about the young soldiers he had commanded over the years, the ones who had trusted him with their lives. He thought about the ones who had not come home. He thought about what they had fought for, what they had died for. When do I leave? He asked 3 days later. Kai found himself aboard a diplomatic shuttle approaching Nexus Prime, the ancient station that served as the seat of Galactic government. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka sat across from him, a young officer assigned as his aide for this mission. She was 28 years old, brilliant in 5 languages, and clearly terrified of what they were walking into. "Sir," she said, reviewing data on her tablet, "I have compiled profiles on the major powers you will be facing. Tell me, the ascendancy of Keth is the oldest," Yuki began. "Insectoid species, hive-structured society. They have been spacefaring for approximately 60,000 years. They view all younger species as essentially children who need to be managed." Kai nodded. "The Dominion of the Pale Stars controls the largest territory," Yuki continued. "They are humanoid but cold-blooded, with a culture built around hierarchy and economic control. They have bankrupted dozens of developing worlds through predatory trade agreements. And the collective of minds?" Yuki's expression darkened. "They are the ones who worry our intelligence services the most," she admitted. "A networked consciousness, billions of individuals sharing thoughts across thousands of worlds. They have the ability to broadcast pacification frequencies that can calm or even control the minds of many species. But not humans?" "No, sir," Yuki said. "Human brain chemistry is resistant to their influence. They find our minds what they call disturbingly opaque, and it frightens them." Kai filed that information away. "What about High Arbiter Vashthula?" he asked. "He has presided over the council for 6,000 years, Yuki replied. "His species is silicon-based, essentially living stone. They are nearly immortal and incredibly patient. He will try to outlast you, to wear you down with procedure and formality until you make a mistake." Kai looked out the viewport at the approaching station. Nexus Prime was enormous, a crystalline sphere that glittered with the light of 1 billion windows. Home to representatives from every known civilization, it was beautiful and terrible. A monument to power that had endured for longer than human civilization had existed. "Sir," Yuki said hesitantly, "may I ask what you plan to say to them?" Kai considered the question. He had no prepared speech, no carefully crafted arguments designed to appease the council and minimize the damage. He had only his own experience, his own understanding of what humanity was and what it could become. "The truth," he said simply. "They will not like it, Lieutenant, but they will remember it." The shuttle began its final approach, and Kai Okonko straightened in his vise seat. He had faced death many times in his life. He had made impossible choices, and lived with the consequences he had held dying. Soldiers and promised them that their sacrifice meant something. Now, he would face something perhaps more dangerous than any battlefield. He would face beings who had ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years and tell them that their time of unchallenged dominance was ending. The shuttle bay doors opened before them like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. Kai stepped forward into the light. The celestial rotunda was the largest enclosed space Kai had ever seen. It stretched upward and outward in every direction. A sphere of crystal and light that could have contained a small city. Floating platforms held the delegations of 347 species, arranged in concentric rings around a central speaking platform that seemed impossibly small against the vastness surrounding it. Kai walked toward that platform with Lieutenant Tanaka at his side, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon him. Some of those eyes were recognizable, belonging to beings that resembled creatures from Earth's own biology. Others were so alien that his human brain struggled to process what it was seeing. Bioluminescent clouds that were actually the distributed bodies of the collective of minds, crystalline structures that shifted and reformed as the silicon-based delegates communicated in frequencies beyond human, hearing massive insectoid forms of the Keth, their compound eyes reflecting light like scattered jewels everywhere. The cold regard of ancient powers who viewed humanity as little more than an infestation that had somehow learned to build starships. The central platform was a circle of white stone perhaps 20 meters across, positioned so that every delegation could look down upon whoever stood there. It was designed to make the speaker feel small. Surrounded, Judge Kai had seen similar tactics used by corporate executives and military tribunals on Earth. He was not impressed. He took his position at the center of the platform and waited. High Arbiter Vasthula rose from his seat on the highest platform, his body grinding like stone against stone as he moved. He was roughly humanoid in shape, but composed entirely of gray and black minerals, with eyes that glowed like distant stars when he spoke. His voice resonated through the chamber with the weight of mountains. "This assembly is called to order," Vasthula announced. "We gather to address the matter of the human species and their violations of galactic law." A murmur rippled through the delegations, clicking and humming and buzzing in 1,000 different languages. Translation implants in Kai's ear converted everything to English, creating a strange overlapping chorus of voices. "The charges against the human government of Earth are as follows," Vasthula continued, producing a document that glowed with soft light. "First, disproportionate military response in violation of the Accords of Gentle Resolution. Second, unauthorized deployment of weapons of mass destruction in a populated system. Third, psychological warfare through the use of what humans call terror tactics. Fourth, maintaining military assets that exceed their population quotient by a factor of 12. Each charge landed like a hammer blow in the silent chamber. Kai remained motionless, his face betraying nothing. "Representatives from affected parties will now present testimony." Vasthula declared the first to speak was a Vreth Kai delegate, a serpentine being with scales that shimmered between green and black. His species had been the raiders, the slavers, the burners of worlds, but as he slithered to a speaking platform, his body language was that of a victim. "My people have suffered a great tragedy," the Vreth Kai said, his voice translated as something between a hiss and a sob. "Our fleet was conducting routine operations in the Proxima region when human warships attacked without warning." Kai's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "They gave us no opportunity to negotiate," the Vreth Kai continued. "No chance to explain our presence or reach a peaceful resolution. They simply opened fire with weapons of terrible destructive power." The delegate paused, and Kai would have sworn the creature was actually crying. 40,000 of my people died that day," the Vreth Kai said. 40,000 souls extinguished by human savagery. And for what? For trying to collect legitimate debts from colonial settlements that refused to honor their obligations. A wave of sympathetic murmurs rose from several delegations. Kai noticed that the species making those sounds were all either allies of the Vreth Kai or powers who had similar debt collection arrangements of their own. The testimony continued. A representative of the Pale Stars Dominion took the platform next. A tall and thin humanoid with skin the color of old paper and eyes like chips of ice. "The Dominion has conducted extensive analysis of human military development," the delegate announced. "Our projections show that if current trends continue, the human species will possess the largest war fleet in the galaxy within 300 years. Holographic charts appeared in the air around him, showing curves and projections that painted humanity as an exponentially growing threat. They breed faster than any other known spacefaring species, the delegate continued. They mature quickly and maintain combat effectiveness for decades. They are resistant to most forms of mental influence and biological weapons that could otherwise provide a deterrent against aggression. The delegate's voice dropped to something that sounded almost like fear. If the Council does not act now to contain human expansion, we may find ourselves facing a power that cannot be stopped. More murmurs. These ones darker and more worried. Kai watched it all with the patience of a stone. A collective of minds delegate drifted forward next. A cloud of glowing particles that somehow conveyed the impression of many voices speaking as one. We have attempted to commune with human consciousness, the collective said, its voice echoing strangely through the translation implant. Their minds are chaotic, fragmented, driven by contradictory impulses that would destroy any properly harmonized species. The cloud pulsed with agitation. When we broadcast pacification frequencies during the Proxima incident, attempting to calm the situation and prevent violence, the human vessels did not respond. Their crews remained aggressive, determined, impossible to reach. The collective paused. They are opaque to us in a way no other species has ever been. We cannot predict their actions. We cannot guide their decisions. We cannot ensure they will behave in ways that preserve galactic stability. The implication was clear. Humanity was dangerous because it could not be controlled more. Delegates spoke as the hours passed. A species that had lost trade advantages when humanity began offering better terms. A government that had seen its citizens emigrating to human colony worlds, where life was better. A military power that had long maintained dominance in its region and now faced competition from human patrol ships. Each one painted humanity as a threat, a disruptor, a force of chaos in a carefully ordered galaxy. And through it all, Kai simply stood and listened. Lieutenant Tanaka watched from a small observer platform nearby, her hands clenched with frustration at the parade of lies and half-truths. But she had been ordered to remain silent unless directly addressed, and she followed that order even as it nearly killed her. Finally, after nearly 6 hours of testimony, High Arbiter Vashthula turned his glowing eyes toward the central platform. The human representative may now offer a defense against these charges, he announced, his stone voice carrying a note of something that might have been anticipation. The chamber fell silent, every eye, every sensor, every form of attention in that vast space focused on the scarred human standing alone in the center of the rotunda. This was the moment they had been waiting for. This was when they expected to see humanity humbled. Stammering through inadequate excuses, trying desperately to placate powers that could not hope to match in age or experience or political sophistication, Kai looked up at the High Arbiter, then slowly turned to survey the entire chamber. His gaze passed over the Vreth Kai delegate, still wearing his mask of grief, over the cold calculations of the pale star's dominion over the swirling anxiety of the collective, over hundreds of other species who had sat in judgment of humanity without ever bothering to understand what they were judging. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of that massive space. No defense, he said. Confusion rippled through the delegations. I will not defend humanity against these charges, Kai continued. Instead, I would like to tell you a story. He clasped his hands behind his back, the stance of a soldier at rest, and began to speak. The ancient empires leaned forward to listen, expecting weakness. They had no idea what was coming. Kai let the silence stretch for a long moment before he began. 60,000 years ago, when the ascendancy of Keth was building its first starships, my ancestors were living in caves, he said, his voice steady and clear. They had no tools except sharpened rocks and wooden sticks. No fire except what they could steal from lightning strikes. No protection from predators except their own bodies and their willingness to fight. He paused, letting that image settle into the minds of the assembled delegates. By every logical measure, they should have died out. The Earth of that era was a death world filled with creatures faster, stronger, and more deadly than the soft pink beings who walked upright on two legs. The insectoid Keth delegates shifted uneasily at the description, but humans had something that no predator could match, Kai continued. We had each other. We lived in groups. We protected our young. We shared food and shelter and knowledge. And when the predators came, we did not run. He lifted his scarred hand, showing it to the assembly. We fought. We fought with sticks and stones in our bare hands if we had to. We died in enormous numbers. But we never stopped fighting, and eventually, the predators learned to fear us. A rumble of discontent rose from several delegations. But Kai pressed on. I am not telling you this to boast, he said. I am telling you this so you understand something fundamental about my species. We did not climb to the top of our food chain because we were the biggest or the fastest or the strongest. We climbed there because we refused to give up. He began to pace slowly across the platform, his boots clicking against the white stone. Your databases contain information about human history, he continued. But I wonder if any of you have truly studied it. Have you read about our wars, our famines, our plagues, our natural disasters? He looked up at the collective of minds. We have died in billions, he said. Again and again throughout our history, events that should have ended us. Extinction-level threats that we somehow survived through sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The glowing cloud pulsed with something that might have been confusion. The Black Death killed half of Europe in 4 years. Kai said, 2 world wars killed over 100 million in 3 decades. We split the atom and immediately used it to vaporize 2 cities full of our own kind. He stopped pacing and faced the assembly directly. We know what horror is, he said quietly. We know what war costs. We have paid that price in our own flesh more times than we can count. He touched the scars on his face. I received these burns when I was 34 years old, he said. A reactor breach on Titan during a battle against human separatists. I spent 2 years in hospitals, 4 surgeries to rebuild my face, 3 more to save my left eye. He let his hand fall. Every human veteran carries scars like these. Some visible and some hidden inside where no one can see them. We have a name for what war does to the minds of those who survive it. We call it post-traumatic stress. It haunts our soldiers for the rest of their lives, turning them into strangers to their own families, driving them to despair and sometimes to death by their own hands. The chamber had grown very quiet. We are not a species that glorifies violence, Kai said. We are a species that has been shaped by violence, forged by it, scarred by it in ways that never fully heal. We fight not because we enjoy it, but because we learned long ago that refusing to fight means extinction. He turned to face the Vreth Kai delegate. You spoke of your 40,000 dead, he said. You called it savagery. You called it genocide. Let me tell you what actually happened in the Proxima system. The Serpentine alien recoiled slightly. Your fleet arrived in that system with 64 warships, Kai said. They found 3 colony transports carrying civilians from the Moravian, Drow, and Tereth species. People fleeing from regions your raiders had already devastated. He began walking toward the Vreth Kai platform, his voice growing harder. Those colonists had no weapons, no military escort, nothing except a human carrier group that happened to be passing through the system on a training mission. He stopped directly below the Vreth Kai delegate. Your admiral broadcast a demand for surrender, Kai said. He gave those transports 1 hour to lower their shields and prepare for boarding. And he made very clear what would happen to the passengers afterward. The Vreth Kai shifted uncomfortably. Slavery, Kai said, his voice flat. That is what your people do to captured populations. You work them to death in your mines and your factories. You breed them like livestock to produce more slaves. You have done this to dozens of species across hundreds of years. He turned back to face the full assembly. The human carrier commander sent a response to your admiral. He continued. She offered him a choice: withdraw from the system and allow the colony ships to pass safely, or face the consequences. Kai paused. Your admiral laughed, he said. I have seen the recording. He actually laughed and said that humans were too soft to fight a real battle, that we would run at the first sign of serious resistance. His voice dropped. He was wrong. Kai began to recount the battle in clinical detail, describing how the human ships had positioned themselves between the Vrethkai fleet and the defenseless transports. Commander Nadia Volkov had 4 ships against 64, he said. She knew she could not win a conventional engagement, so she did something your admiral never expected. He described how the human vessels had charged directly into the Vrethkai formation, closing to point-blank range where their heavier weapons could do maximum damage. Your ships were designed for raiding, Kai explained. Fast and lightly armored, meant to overwhelm targets with numbers and then board them before they could escape. You were not prepared for an enemy that came straight at you. The battle had been brutal and costly, with 2 human ships destroyed in the first hour. But the human crews had fought with a ferocity that the Vrethkai had never encountered. Our soldiers do not surrender to slavers, Kai said simply. They would rather die, and many of them did. By the end of 4 hours, the Vrethkai fleet had been shattered. 40,000 of your people died, Kai acknowledged. But 30,000 civilians of 3 different species are alive because of what my people sacrificed that day. He looked up at High Arbiter Vasthula. You ask why humanity maintains military forces that exceed our population quotient by a factor of 12, he said. This is why. Because we are surrounded by predators who have been preying on the weak for millennia while this council did nothing. He turned to survey the entire assembly. You call what we did a violation of the Accords of Gentle Resolution, he said. But I have a question for all of you. In 40,000 years of your enlightened rule, how many species have you actually saved? He pulled a data chip from his pocket and activated it, projecting information into the air around him. I have studied your own archives, he said. The records you keep of civilizations that have risen and fallen under your watch. Names and images began to scroll through the air. Species long dead. Worlds long silent. 1,600 sentient species have gone extinct since this council was formed, Kai said. Not from natural causes. From violence, from exploitation, from neglect. He pointed at the Vrethkai. 312 of those species were victims of Vrethkai, raids that the council refused to stop. He pointed at the Pale Star's Dominion. 247 were economically strangled by trade agreements that stripped their worlds of resources and left them to starve. He pointed at the Collective of Minds. 189 were forcibly harmonized into your network. Their individual consciousnesses erased and absorbed against their will. The chamber erupted in angry denials and protests. But Kai stood firm. You call us violent, he said, his voice cutting through the noise. But we are the first species in 40,000 years to actually stop the killing. Not negotiate with killers, not appease them with treaties they never intended to honor. Stop them. He let the silence that followed stretch out. That is why you are really afraid of us, he said quietly. Not because we are dangerous, but because we proved that the old ways do not have to continue forever. The celestial rotunda had become a storm of voices. Delegates shouted accusations in 100 languages, their words overlapping into a wall of noise that made the translation. Implants buzz and crackle with confusion. The Keth representatives clicked their mandibles in rapid patterns that conveyed extreme agitation, demanding that Kai be arrested immediately for disrespecting the council. The Pale Star's Dominion delegate had risen from his seat, his pale face flushed with something that looked like genuine fury. Even the Collective of Minds had begun to swirl in agitated patterns. their distributed consciousness struggling to process what they had just heard. High Arbiter Vasthula raised one massive stone arm, and his voice boomed through the chamber like an avalanche. "Order," he commanded. "This assembly will come to order." The noise slowly died down. Though angry murmurs continued to ripple through the delegations, the ancient arbiter turned his glowing eyes toward Kai, and for the first time, there was something other than bored superiority in his gaze. "The human representative will explain his accusations," Vasthula said, "or he will be held in contempt of this assembly." Kai inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the threat without showing any fear. "I need explain nothing," he said calmly. "Everything I have said is documented in your own archives. Any delegate who doubts my words is welcome to verify them." He looked around at the gathered representatives. "But verification is not what concerns you," he continued. "What concerns you is that I have said these things out loud, in front of every species in this chamber." He began to walk slowly around the platform, making eye contact with delegation after delegation. "You have built your power on the assumption that the younger species are too ignorant to understand how this galaxy really works," he said. "You have relied on their gratitude for being allowed to exist at all, their fear of what would happen if they challenged the established order." He stopped and faced a section of the chamber where the smaller delegations were seated, species who had been granted barely more recognition than humanity. "But they are watching now," Kai said. "They are listening. They are seeing the ancient powers respond to simple questions with anger instead of answers." He turned back to the central platforms where the great power sat. "Let me tell you what I think is really happening here," he said. "You did not bring me before this council to punish humanity for the Proxima incident. You brought me here to make an example of us." He clasped his hands behind his back. "You wanted to humiliate Earth in front of the entire galaxy." He continued, "You wanted to demonstrate that any species that challenged your authority would be crushed, that the old order would continue forever." His voice hardened. "But you made a mistake. You assumed that humans would respond to this tribunal the way other species have. We were supposed to grovel, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, and promise to behave ourselves in the future." He almost smiled. "You do not understand us at all." The Keth delegation leader rose on multiple legs, its voice a harsh clicking translated as cold fury. "The human speaks as though his species has some special quality that makes it superior to the rest of us." It said, "This is the arrogance we have warned about. This is why humanity must be contained before it spreads further." Kai turned to face the ancient insectoid. "You mistake honesty for arrogance," he replied. "I am not claiming that humans are better than other species. I am claiming that we are different from the powers that currently rule this galaxy." He took a step toward the Keth platform. "Your ascendancy has endured for 60,000 years," he said. "That is an achievement worthy of respect. But tell me something. In all that time, how many times have your soldiers chosen to die rather than retreat from a hopeless battle?" The Keth leader was silent. "Humans do that regularly," Kai said. "Not because we are braver than you, but because our instincts work differently. When a human sees innocent people in danger, something activates in our minds that makes running away feel worse than dying." He turned to the Pale Star's Dominion. "Your species has built an economic empire that spans thousands of worlds," he acknowledged. "Very impressive, but when one of your colonies faces disaster, what happens? You calculate whether it is cost-effective to save them, and if the numbers do not work out, you let them die." The Dominion delegates started to protest, but Kai cut him off. "Humans do not calculate like that," he said. "When disaster strikes one of our colonies, ships from every human world volunteer to help, not because anyone orders them to, not because there is profit in it, because the thought of doing nothing is unbearable to us." He faced the collective of minds. "You share consciousness across billions of individuals," he said. You have achieved a unity that other species can barely imagine. But your unity comes at a price. Individual minds that resist harmonization are suppressed or destroyed. Dissent is treated as a disease to be cured. The collective. Pulsed with something that might have been offense, humans could never submit to that. Kai said, "Our minds are too independent, too stubborn, too attached to our individual identities. You find us opaque because our thoughts are truly our own, and we would rather die than have them taken from us." He returned to the center of the platform and faced High Arbiter Vashthula directly. "You asked for an explanation." He said, "Here it is. Humanity is dangerous because we cannot be controlled. We cannot be intimidated. We cannot be convinced that accepting injustice is the price of survival." He let that sink in. When we see something wrong, we try to fix it. When we see someone suffering, we try to help. When we see a bully hurting innocent people, we stand in front of the innocent and we fight. His voice dropped to something quieter, but somehow more intense. "That is what happened at Proxima," he said. "Our ships were not there to start a war. They were there because Commander Volkov could not stand by and watch 30,000 people be dragged into slavery. She knew her squadron was outnumbered. She knew many of her people would die. But she also knew that if she ran away, she would have to live with that choice forever." He touched the scars on his face again. "This is what I want you to understand about humans," he said. "We are not immune to fear. We are not incapable of suffering. We break under the weight of what we experience in battle. And many of us never fully recover." He lowered his hand. "But we do it anyway, because for us, the alternative is worse. The alternative is becoming the kind of species that looks away when evil happens, the kind that lets the innocent suffer, because helping them would be inconvenient or dangerous." He looked around at the ancient powers. "You have survived for tens of thousands of years by mastering the art of looking away," he said. "You have maintained your stability by sacrificing the weak to appease the strong. You have built an order based on calculated indifference to suffering. It does not affect you directly." His voice grew harder. "But the younger species have been watching you. They have been learning, and now they have seen something different. They have seen what happens when someone refuses to look away." He pointed at the Vreth-Kai delegate. "Your raids will not stop because this council passes another resolution," he said. "They will stop because your victims now know that resistance is possible." He pointed at the Pale Star's Dominion. "Your economic strangleholds will not last forever," he said, "because the species you have trapped in debt are starting to ask why they should accept terms that were designed to keep them poor." He pointed at the collective. "Your harmonization campaigns will face new obstacles," he said, "because individuals who once thought resistance was hopeless are starting to believe they might actually have a choice." Kai turned to face the full assembly one final time. "You should be worried," he said, "not because humanity wants to destroy you. We have no interest in your thrones or your territories. What we want is much more dangerous to the order you have built." He paused. "We want everyone watching to understand that they do not have to be afraid anymore. We want them to know that the ancient powers can be challenged, that the old rules can be broken, that a better galaxy is possible if enough people are willing to fight for it." His voice rang through the silent chamber. "That is the real threat we represent. Not our weapons, not our military strength, not our resistance to your mental influence. The real threat is the idea we carry with us wherever we go." He stood straight and tall, a scarred old soldier who had seen too much suffering to be frightened by disapproving aliens. The idea that things can change. The celestial rotunda had never been so quiet. Kai stood alone on the central platform, surrounded by 347 species who had not made a sound for nearly a full minute. He could see the effect of his words rippling through the chamber like waves in still water. The great power sat frozen, their representatives struggling to process what had just happened. They had expected to preside over a humiliation. a carefully staged demonstration of their authority that would keep humanity in its place for generations. Instead, they had been confronted with something they had not faced in millennia. Defiance without apology, truth without fear. High Arbiter. Vostula finally broke the silence, his stone voice grinding with something that might have been confusion or might have been the first stirrings of doubt. The human representative has made extraordinary claims, he said slowly. This assembly will require time to verify his statements and determine an appropriate response. Kai nodded as though he had expected exactly this. Of course, he said. But before you adjourn, I should inform you of some developments that have occurred while we have been speaking. The chamber stirred with uncertainty. Kai pulled out a datapad and activated it, projecting a series of documents into the air around him. Approximately 6 hours ago, Earth's diplomatic corps began reaching out to certain member species of this council, he said. Species who have long been dissatisfied with their treatment under the current order. The projection showed official seals and signatures, treaty documents bearing the marks of multiple governments. As of 30 minutes ago, the following species have signed mutual defense agreements with Earth, Kai announced. The Moravian Confederation, whose colonies have suffered 3 major Vrethkai raids in the past decade. The Drell Assembly, whose economic development has been suppressed by Pale Star's trade policies for over a century. The survivors of the Yith extinction, whose homeworld was destroyed by Council inaction during a preventable asteroid impact. He continued reading names: the Tereth Republic, the Kovani Union, the Free Systems of Aldebaran, the Reformed Theocracy of Vega. The list went on, reaching 18 names before Kai lowered the datapad. These agreements are purely defensive in nature, he explained. No signatory is obligated to participate in offensive operations, but an attack on any member will be treated as an attack on all. The Pale Star's delegate finally found his voice. This is an illegal coalition, he shouted. These treaties violate the Charter of Unified Species. You cannot simply form a new power block without council approval. Kai looked at him with something that might have been pity. We are not asking for your approval, he said simply. We are informing you that it has already been done. He turned to face the smaller delegations, the species who had been watching in silence throughout his speech for too long. The young and the weak have had no choice but to accept whatever the ancient powers decided was best for them, he said. No more. From this day forward, there is an alternative. He saw movement among those delegations. Representatives leaned toward each other and whispering urgently. Any species that wishes to discuss membership in the Coalition of Forgotten Worlds is welcome to approach our delegation. Kai continued. We make no demands. We set no conditions beyond a shared commitment to mutual defense and fair treatment. He looked back at the great powers. We are not your enemies, he said. Humanity has no desire for war with the Ascendancy or the Dominion or the Collective. We are builders, not conquerors. We want to trade with you, to learn from you, to share what we have learned in return. His voice hardened slightly. But we will not stand idle while the weak are preyed upon. We will not look away from suffering just because stopping it might upset the established order. And we will not apologize for being what we are. He picked up his datapad and prepared to leave the platform in 40,000 years. He said, You never once asked yourselves a simple question. He looked back at the assembled powers. What happens when the prey animals band together? What happens when someone shows them they do not have to be afraid anymore? He straightened his shoulders. The stance of a soldier who had completed his mission. Humanity is not your enemy. High Arbiter, we could have been your greatest allies. You could have had partners who would stand beside you against any threat, who would bring fresh perspectives to problems that have stagnated for millennia. He shook his head slowly. But you did not want partners. You wanted subjects, species that would bow and scrape and accept whatever crumbs you chose to give them. He turned and began walking toward the exit platform where Lieutenant Tanaka waited. "So now you will have neither," he said over his shoulder. "Neither subjects nor partners. Just neighbors who will no longer pretend that your way's the only way." Behind him, the chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates shouted at each other. At the High Arbiter, at the empty space where Kai had stood, the Keth demanded immediate military action against Earth. The Pale Stars called for economic sanctions that would strangle the new coalition before it could take root. The collective simply hummed with distress, their networked minds struggling to model a future they had never anticipated. But Kai noticed something else as he walked through the chaos among the smaller delegations. Representatives were quietly slipping away from their seniors, young diplomats and junior aides. Beings who had spent their careers being told that challenging the old order was impossible. They were heading toward the human shuttle bay. Lieutenant Tanaka fell into step beside Kai as he reached the exit corridor. "Sir," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. "That was not at all what I expected when we came here." Kai allowed himself a small smile. "War is about more than weapons." "Lieutenant," he said, "the most powerful weapon we have is an idea. And ideas are much harder to destroy than starships." They walked in silence for a moment. "What happens now?" "Sir," Tanaka asked. Kai considered the question. "Now we go home," he said, "and we prepare for whatever comes next. The ancient powers will not simply accept what happened here today. There will be pressure, threats, perhaps even attempts at retaliation." He glanced at his aide. "That they have a problem they did not have before." Every species in that chamber saw what happened. They saw humanity stand up to powers that have ruled this galaxy for 40,000 years. And they saw that the sky did not fall. He resumed walking. "Hope is a dangerous thing, Lieutenant. Once people believe that change is possible, it becomes very difficult to convince them otherwise." As they approached the shuttle bay, Kai saw a small crowd gathered near the human vessel. Delegates from a dozen minor species were waiting there, their expressions a mixture of fear and determination. "General Okonkwo," one of them said, stepping forward, "I am Ambassador Thrall of the Moravian Confederation. We would like to discuss the details of our new alliance." Another delegate joined her, "And I represent the Drell Assembly. We have questions about the Coalition's defensive protocols." More voices joined in. More representatives introducing themselves. More species expressing interest in this new possibility that had suddenly opened before them. Kai looked at Lieutenant Tanaka. "It appears our work is not finished yet," he said quietly. Tanaka straightened and squared her shoulders, the young officer finding new purpose in the chaos of history being made. "No, sir," she said. "I believe it is just beginning." Kai nodded and turned to face the gathered delegates. These representatives of forgotten worlds who had finally found the courage to hope behind them. Through the viewports, the stars of the galaxy stretched out toward infinity, and somewhere out there, on 1,000 different worlds, beings who had never dared to dream of change were starting to believe that maybe the old order was not eternal after all. Maybe the future could be different. Maybe, just maybe, it was time for something new. The ancient empires had begun to worry, and that worry would grow with each passing day. As the coalition of forgotten worlds proved that another way was possible, Kai Okonkwo, scarred veteran of 100 battles, had fired a shot that would echo through history, not with weapons, but with words, not with threats, but with truth, and the galaxy would never be quite the same again.